But in education, what I want to argue today is the things that we say we want kids to have, the things that we want our students to come to college with, the things that we want our students to come to school with. These are the things we're saying they gotta have. Critical thinking, problem solving, social and emotional intelligence, social responsibility, grit and optimism. These are the things that people are going around the country making a lot of money talking about. Kids gotta have grit. Now, you guys are in the TRIO program. You know grit. We're bound. You know grit. You know where these kids are coming from. But they're not gritty enough to be successful. If you had to do what they had to do to get here, what are you talking about grit? But they want to measure grit. I'm a person of color and I'm standing here. How you gonna measure me? And I know who I am. You can't measure that. But this idea that we gotta measure grit, social and emotional intelligence. Have you ever seen hip hop? Hip hop is nothing but social and emotional intelligence. Have you ever seen a cipher? If you're in a cipher, nobody raises their hand. I would like to rap next. Me, I'm next. How do these kids know when to go? They're listening to each other. They're building off of each other. That's social and emotional intelligence. But we can't measure that in schools. Social responsibility. That's hip hop. Steal somebody's rhyme and see what happens. Research. These kids know everything Kendrick Lamar, J. Cole, Future are saying, but they don't have no research skills. It's a disconnect, and that disconnect goes back to that picture I showed you of those students sitting in the classroom. It's not meant for our kids, so we have to find structures. And as Hillard would say, there are profound ways of excellence that we know. And when people say, well, you know, hip hop could be a little ratchet at times. I don't disagree. But if hip hop has the ability to corrupt young minds, it also has the ability to uplift them. That's right. And we have to focus on that. The power that it has, the power that it has always had, is very important to what these kids are doing. So I'm going to show you this video to give you an example of what I mean. He's two, and he's cute. Gibberish. Gibberish. He's on beat. Now watch him. He's tracking with his eyes. He's on beat. Everything we say we want in an elementary kid to come to school with, he has it through hip hop. Now watch him. He's tracking every time the guy says something. Now watch what he does here. Genius. Come on, beat. If he had words, bars, like bars. Right, but what is he doing?
He's thinking critically.
He's thinking critically. For his age, his level, he's thinking critically. So when we talk about hip hop, it's not just kids having fun and rapping. We're talking about the cognition that is taking place. There's cognition there. So we're talking about complex language shifting abilities. We're talking about kinesthetic brilliance. His whole body is movement. And then he knew exactly when to come in. On beat. Every time his uncle said something, he watched him. His uncle said, standing here with Kiri and friends. He looked at his friend, tracing the speaker. That's right. These are the things that we say we want kids to have. Creativity, focused play, improvisation. Research knows that the improvisation is the crux of creativity. The ability to think on the fly, create on the fly in real time. That is the crux of creativity. There's a great book by Tony Wagner. He goes around to all these execs, all the people who make all the gadgets we play with. And he asked them, you got kids, what do you do with your kids? And they say, and Steve Jobs said this as well, I don't let them play with this stuff. You got schools all around the country trying to get an iPad in a kid's hand. Let them be. They they will create. You remember the games we used to play with nobody? Just games.
Yes.
Had your own rules, own system, own language. Just creating. And that's what they want for their kids. They want their kids to just create. Creativity, to improv, to think together, to problem solve, to have an argument and figure it out. That's what hip hop is about. That's the roots of this genius and the ability to express yourself. And then when you see that, you see hip hop take space in a third space of schooling. It's the unofficial space, the out of school space, the popular space, the non-standard language speaking space. And that is the space for many of our kids, this third space of education. This official school space, not the place. It's the place where they're penalized, it's the place of zero tolerance policies. We have to find these spaces, but what if we can get a little bit of this in there? But we got to keep this space sacred. And it's through the act of storytelling. It's through the act of students finding their voice. That's what hip hop lets them do. It's the art of storytelling. That's hip hop. Hip hop education is about these powerful, powerful narratives that they get to express themselves in the ways in which they want to express themselves. It's about giving students voice and them taking the voice that you don't have to give it to them. Defining voice, right? Capturing an author's reality. But when you capture an author's reality, you are capturing their sexualities, their abilities, their spiritualities, their class-based, their race-based, their religion-based. When an author tells you their reality, they're going to give it to you all. And sometimes we don't like how raw it is, but it's their reality. Sometimes we don't like the language, but it's their reality. Right? And understanding that art should push boundaries. That's what art should do. Art should make you uncomfortable. Art should make you think differently. And hip hop is art. Hip hop is culture. And it's young kids finding their voice. And that's why it's so important. That's why hip hop educators are getting the results we are getting in the classroom. That's why you got districts all over the country. Can you do a hip hop something? Because they don't know what, but they want it because they know kids are responding to it. But in the same breath, you have to understand that the classroom has to look different again. You can't have kids doing hip hop, but you want to sit still. It's not hip hop. You just want the same thing that picture I showed you wanted, and you want to call it hip hop. But you want somebody to be authentic, use their voice, and have their own narratives. The speaker, the author, the storyteller, the griot, the rapper. That narrative has to be put forefront and centered in the work that we are doing, so students can tell their own stories, can be their own facilitators of their learning, create their own metrics of their learning, and participate fully in society in the ways in which they want to. But it's also about the ways in which they're naturally embedded within them. And then it's our job to help them weave and bob and understand and code switch and do all of those things. But we can't do that until we ignite what is in them, that is already in them. And so, this idea, got a little funky here, but the idea is that through hip hop, we get truth telling. We get local connections, right? One thing about hip hop is local. Right? You can talk to a kid all day about Kendrick Lamar, but where that kid is from, they're gonna give you that local artist. That local connections, the local, what's happening on the ground. It's creative, it's voice, and it provides action for kids. It's a framework that gives you something dynamic. And so I'm going to pass the mic to Ross.
Wow.
Can we give her another round of
Oh,
applause?
yeah.
It's an uncanny feeling to cite someone in your dissertation whom you really admire and then present with that.
Yes.
So I just want to thank you for being here.
I love you, brother. No
It
problem.
means so much to me. So, to that end, sorry for my little pseudo Oprah moment there. So what I'm going to speak to you all about is a lot of this. I know is that proverbial preaching to the choir, and I know Dr. Love has this ability to take us to church, and I always feel that electric charge that she brings anytime I listen to her TED Talks. I've read her, I mean, all her books and her articles, but her book, Hip Hop's Little Sisters Speak, I especially recommend that for anyone who's maybe a novice in hip hop pedagogy. And if any of you are pursuing a doctoral program or a master's thesis right now, I think it can help because she really captures and affirms some of the misgivings that we have about our purpose when we sometimes indirectly perpetuate that which we purport to subvert. We're trying to subvert a system that by being in it at times, we are perpetuating. This system steeped in isms, right? Misogyny, patriarchy, racism, white supremacy, I can go on and on. But what we need to do is to transmogrify and change the paradigm of what does achievement mean? And Dr. Love said something that I'd like to underscore is the classroom is a fluid thing. Learning never stops. There is no terminal velocity to learning. Students don't stop learning as soon as Saturday session with Upper Bound is over and they walk out. They're still learning. It may be a message that is directly antithetical to the message that you're hoping to present in your Saturday session, but they don't actually stop learning. So what we need to do is redefine the constructs of achievement. We need to reframe achievement so, as Dr. Love mentioned, it's aligned with the cultural literacy and the capital of the students that we want to serve, that we purport to serve. So to that end, let's think about the elements of hip hop and conjoin that with the elements of much of what we do as trio personnel. And just last year, I successfully wrote with a couple other of our counselors an SSS grant, and in that grant for our SLA program, any SSS folks in here? All right, right on. I'm that old dude that still high fives people. Or dad, whatever. We created a trio learning community that's part of our Cypher program at Skyline College. If you look up skylinecollege.edu in San Bruno, California, we have a Cypher program. And I'm in the process of hopefully writing an article with a colleague of Dr. Love's and I about how counselors in categorical programs, Gear Up, EOPS, Trio, can work to create a hip-hop Cypher learning community through counseling. Because many of our students have to take counseling classes when they come to our campuses. Our students do at least. So how are we going to redefine the elements of achievement to make those things plausible for an education technocracy that's steeped in archaic ways of thinking? Okay? Let's talk about hip-hop first. There are 4 primary elements of hip-hop that I would say lay the foundation. However, hip-hop is cultural, right? It is cultural. It isn't something that, just like learning in the classroom, stops as soon as you walk out of the cypher. Like Dr. Love said, much of this hip-hop-ness is intuitive. It's ethereal. So in the cypher, you're picking up on social cues that have been engendered over time. It's not something that you learn through a multiple choice test, okay? So when we have the b-boy, we have someone who's expressing themselves through the art of dance, okay? So there are dance classes in our schools. There's dance majors, it's theater, right? There's no reason why we can't embed something akin to the b-boy in that curriculum. We have DJs, we have MCs, which Dr. Love touched on. We have graffiti artists, which has taken up a taboo and some might say a pejorative term when you talk about graffiti. But I don't mean just sort of impetuous spraying of walls that maybe don't belong to us. Creating that space in which something like this is valued as a form of expression rather than criminalized. Who are the folks in this picture? Shakespeare and Pac. We're on a first name basis. Yeah. Yeah. So, William Shakespeare and Tupac Shakur. Tupac Amaru Shakur. So, what can we say about these 2 artists that unites them? What do they have in common? They're both storytellers. Literature. What else? Literature, okay. They're luminaries in the literary genres. What else?
Cultural impact.
They have cultural impact, indelible cultural impact. Yeah. Even after they've passed, we still talk about them because they've had impact not only on our students, but on us. We are part of the hip-hop generation, even if for any reason but by proxy, because we serve those who are steeped in hip-hop culture. So if you don't ascribe to hip-hop culture of your own account, I would say that it's still remiss to purport to serve students who do if you're not going to self-educate a little bit about it, and which is why we're having this discussion here today in the first place. So when we talk about proper English, when we talk about the achievement gap Dr. Love mentioned, the achievement gap also picks up a pejorative because it assumes that there's certain elements of achievement that are common sense, that you should just know by way of going to a formal institution, brick and mortar, that teaches you achievement or engenders achievement or the tools for achievement. But whose constructs of achievement are we talking about? When we're talking about achievement, are we considering the fact that the Great Pyramids in Egypt, before any of these schools, any of these PWIs in the United States were created, the Great Pyramid in Egypt is made of 2.3 million stones, each of them cut 1/1000th of an inch before we had lasers, right? So in 1979, scholars from Japan and the United States attempted to recreate the Great Pyramids using infrared lasers. That mug fell over like a deck of cards after 1 week. So don't tell me that achievement is something that's finite, that's rote, that's assumed. Achievement in of itself needs to be transmogrified. The term proper English. Woo! Can't stand that time. Because proper English is on a continuum, it is fluid, it is contrary. I'll give you an example. How many of you are on social media in one way, shape, or form? All right, cool. So just so you know, I'm tagging everybody. No. So when you want to add a friend on Facebook, what is the term for that? What do we say? Do we say add me as a friend? Friend me. But is friend a verb?
Now it is.
Now it is. Oh, interesting how that worked out. But if our students said that in the classroom, they would be vilified, particularly when they're coming from communities in which proper English is assumed to be something foreign to them. Give you another example. When you're searching for an obscure fact, what do we call that? What are you doing?
Googling.
You're Googling it. Is that a verb? As my mom says when I used to act up back in the day, she'd say, hail to the nut. Okay? I'm writing a dissertation right now. And when I asked someone to chair my committee, I didn't say, could you sit in that top chair and be the person who facilitates the conversation when I defend in January? No, I said, could you chair my committee, please, Dr. Rodriguez? She didn't look at me all like with stank eye, like, what are you talking about? Her eye wasn't askance. Sorry, I said stank. So again, chairing my committee. Interesting how proper English picks up colloquialisms when it's convenient for it.
Yes. Yes.
Why can't it do the same for hip hop when it means that we're actually going to have an impact on the students that we purport to serve? So now back to this picture. We have Tupac and we have William Shakespeare. Tupac wrote utilizing many literary devices that help augment or amplify his impact on our generation and generations to come. Assonance, consonants, metaphors, simile, right? I can go on and on. William Shakespeare, assonance, consonants, metaphor, simile, iambic pentameter. I can go on and on. There's no reason why, when we speak about Tupac's Holla If You Hear Me, that we don't preface it with magnum opus. That it has the same impact as someone's symphonic tune that they cultivated generations past. Okay? What is the common theme in terms of why we vilify one, I would say, demographic or genre of teaching versus the other, context. Just to add an element, an inflection of levity here, context. When we have warm water, it does what to a potato? Softens it. What does it do to an egg? Hard-boiled egg. Interesting. So same context, different demographic or elements in that context, and you're going to have different outcomes. Rather than blaming the outcome, let's change some of the conditioning around how we construct achievement. Now let's drill down and talk about actual human beings. So in the nonprofit that I direct education programs for, Hip Hop Chess Federation, we work with the Oakland Unified School District and the San Francisco Unified School District, as I mentioned at the top of the hour. We work with students who are transitioning from continuation schools, which is sort of the buffer between, the conduit between juvenile hall and mainstream high school or middle schools. And we teach leadership, which is college elective in California, where I'm from. And so we're trying to infuse some of the elements of standard English that students have to know, unfortunately, to graduate, using a hip-hop inflection. So one of the exercises that we do, Adisa and I do, who's our founder, is an exercise called Shakespeare or hip-hop MC. So we're gonna play that game here. Y'all ready?
Ready.
Can I get a gladiator thumbs up? You with me? All right, right on. Very synchronized, by the way. The top one. My nightstick on the top of your cap, my blackjack you'll be swallowing for protesting and hollering. The policy is quality of life and zero tolerance. Second one. The wisest of peasants could defy the coldest presence of king, queens, and emperors when combined with holy essence. Okay. The top one, MC or Shakespeare?
Do you think it's an MC or do you think Shakespeare wrote that? MC. At first I thought it was MC, but MC.
Like Cat Williams said, don't worry, I'll wait. Okay. Let me know when y'all ready. Y'all can decide. What do we think? What do we think? MC, okay. What are some cues, to borrow from my mentor, what are some cues, social cues that you picked up on? Hollering.
Protesting.
Protesting. Right, because back then, yeah. Right. Right.
Zero tolerance.
Okay, spelling, you're picking up on things, but you weren't necessarily taught that. Okay. So that top one, you're all correct for those of you who said hip hop MC. That top one is from a song called What is the Law by one of my favorite MCs, Pharoah Monch. He's amazing. Another song that we use quite a bit is Black Hand Side, where he talks about just sort of the duality of being biracial and the lack of monolithic black narrative. So another song that we use, by the way. But that song is from What is the Law? Especially with everything going on around the country. In terms of the dialectic around police brutality and zero tolerance in the school to prison pipeline, which is the theme of my dissertation, is school to prison and hip hop pedagogy and restorative justice. We use that quite a bit. Second stanza, if you will. So, MC or Shakespeare?
Shakespeare.
You're brave. I like you.
But I think that might be MC.
I think it's MC.
Because everyone else says Shakespeare.
MC.
Okay. Oh, now we're okay. This is group thing. Okay.
Unless you miss.
How many of you? I just want to get a show of hands, just law of averages. How many of you think the second stanza was an MC artist, a hip hop artist? Okay. What about Shakespeare? It's about half and half. Dr. Lund, what do you think?
We talked about last night.
Yeah, that's right. You're right. What did you think originally?
Originally, I thought it was Shakespeare.
Okay.
So
So
it's MC.
it's an MC, yes. Yes. So the second one is from an unreleased track. I think it's called Gems by one of my other favorite MCs, Jizza from the Wu-Tang Clan. So when we play this game, a lot of my students, They go, oh, Professor Diaz, Jack knows, the trick question. I never said it had to be one or the other. I said it could be one or the other. It didn't have to be bifurcated, one had to be one or the other. So thank you all for playing, I appreciate it. So when we talk about reaching students who are, for lack of a better term, castaways in our system because they don't ascribe to traditional modes of thinking, traditional constructs of achievement, but through hip hop, we're making that impact. One could stand to reason that you could reach anybody, including these three gentlemen who are from my critical thinking class at San Quentin Prison. To protect their anonymity, I'm not going to share names, but these are three of my students from San Quentin, my critical thinking class. They have excelled beyond all the modest expectations superimposed on them. What does that actually look like? Here's graduation day at San Quentin. They all have AA degrees. I forgot this had a laser. What's that at the top? Is that one? Which one is it? Oh, okay. So this gentleman got a full ride to Berkeley. You see Berkeley. And these two brothers right here got full rides to San Francisco State University. He has been invited when he's paroled next year to go to the Iowa Young Writers and Scholars seminar to work with youth because he created the journalism program at San Quentin, which has been awarded countless awards in the journalism field, which I'm not a part of, so I don't necessarily know what those awards are. But I know Iowa Young Writers is a really huge deal. So, again, modest expectations, hip-hop pedagogy, transcendence. Now, when we say hip-hop pedagogy, it doesn't unilaterally mean that we're always using MCs. We're always using song lyrics. Remember the 4 elements. 1. Second, hip-hop MCs borrow and sample, if you will, from many influences throughout social milieus that influence their music, influence the art, influence the music that's being produced. Okay? They may sample from hip-hop's Little Sister Speak. They may sample from Friere. They may sample from other writers who are literary luminaries in the field, not necessarily MCs. So I don't want to give off the impression that you need to go home and practice beatboxing in order to inculcate hip-hop pedagogy. Okay, so what we have done at Skyline, my previous institution before I came to Laney, and I'm currently in the throes of creating a hip-hop learning community there, is that we use, well, what I would say for those of you who, I was a minor in ethnic studies, but ethnic studies, I would say influences, critical race theorists, from Derek Bell to Ian Haley Lopez to Friere to Gloria Ladson Billings. These are also the folks that are incorporated in our hip-hop pedagogy, right? Because they have influence on the MCs themselves. Okay, what is this a picture of? Famous experiment, the doll test, yes. Very subtle cue, yes. So, anyone know in what year this experiment happened?
Twice. It happened twice.
Yeah, the first time. The first time it happened. No, earlier. Or way earlier. 1940. By Mamie and Kenneth Clark. This is called the Clark doll test. I didn't want to write their name because I wanted to test you to see how much you were aware of this experiment, because the influence, I would say the vestiges of its findings live today among the students that we want to serve in our trio program. Okay? So what we're going to discuss today is some of the resistance around defining achievement for students like ours, first generation, low income, and or students of color, right? Not to say that intersectionality doesn't exist, that you can't be all of the above, not to mention gender issues, and gender being its own performance in society. But the doll test, they asked this young man, which of these dolls has a brighter future, is more likely to be successful as an adult? There's your answer. In Little Sister Speaks, I remember very distinctly, there's a chapter where Dr. Love asked one of her students from HCC, one of the nonprofit that she worked with, white tutors walked by, and who's going to be successful in this center? And the students, rather than pointing at themselves, pointed to the white tutors. Not knowing maybe the compendium of struggles that they may have. They may not necessarily be high achieving in the traditional sense, but just assuming off of very cursory glances, okay? So what we call this in the academic field, as I'm sure you're aware, is implicit bias, okay? Now, implicit bias is something that we're going to discuss in greater detail in a couple slides, but bear in mind your own implicit bias when we conduct the exercise coming up. So, in TRIO, we transcend learning classrooms already before we start any hip-hop pedagogy program. Because we take our students on college tours, despite the denuding of our budgets, we still manage to do that. Because no one manages to do more with less than TRIO folks. That's, as my students say, 100. Okay? For real, that's like the most real talk, because I have had my budget cut in half, and we have cut our summer programs from 6 weeks to 2 weeks to 2 days. But the outcomes are the same because we are, I'm gonna carbon date myself like MacGyver with like a lima bean. You know what I mean? So, but it's because we don't allow that implicit bias to direct how much we can achieve. I think the person that says, oh, now I can't buy such and such so students will stop learning, forgets that achievement doesn't necessarily require material tools. But we have to change those constructs so when we do have the budget that's afforded to us, that's equitable to us, we can do even more than our classrooms. So I'm going to show you a few slides, and you're going to tell me, if you will, indulge, whether it's a picture of a classroom or not. Okay? Classroom. Okay, that's a picture of me in a critical thinking class I taught at Skyline. What's this? Classroom. We call this the graveyard method, right? Students sitting quietly in rows. Okay?
I like that.
Bored to death that my hand gestures, getting vertigo, trying to keep up with my hand gestures. Classroom. Why is this a classroom? Learning, heuristic or experiential learning, yeah. Okay, so in Hip Hop Chess, we have a summer contract with the Boys and Girls Club. And I was a club kid myself growing up. So in the Boys and Girls Club in East Palo Alto, California, which is about a hop and a skip away from Stanford University, they have a sponsorship through Adobe and Intel. And they have a computer clubhouse. And in that computer clubhouse, there's a sound studio. And in that sound studio, genius is born. Or genius is cultivated, and I should say undergirded.